Rudy, our boys are back in action. It's a high noon kickoff. What are you expecting?
The boys are back in town. I'm expecting a defense to come play at Hard Rock Stadium. They've had an extra week to prepare to fix some issues. So fingers crossed, I guess.
The boys are back in town. The boys are back in town.
Yeah.
We need that defense back in town. We need the defense to show up. There's been a bolo for the last 2 or 3 games with specifically our D line. Gonna excuse our secondary because we know what they are. But speaking of the secondary, I was reading an article in the Miami Herald this week, specifically citing these problems with the defense, right? And Guidry was talking about there's a major communication error that's been occurring in the past couple games with the secondary. And I was like, yo, how do you have communication errors? You just talk to your buddy. Like, and it's not like at max, maybe you're 25 yards from someone, you just scream a little bit, right? Apparently, that was not the issue. So the issue, Guidry, and yeah, I think it was Daryl Porter Jr. was also commenting on it, was basically hand signals. So they were saying that, like, I guess for different plays, different adjustments, different audibles, they have certain signals that they want to throw towards each other. And sometimes tempo will take over. Sometimes the game will move a little bit faster than what they're expecting, and they're not able to get those signals back. That's where the communication issues. Do you think the hand signals and the communication issues are going to tighten up that secondary, or do you think there's a bigger underlying problem that we're not really going to be able to fix and we just kind of got to accept?
I think there's a bigger underlying problem, but I'm not going to say that it's something that can't be fixed because I feel like it's just basic X's and O's. And Chris, you're going to hear me harp on this over and over again. We've seen it since, week 2, week 3 of the season, that just basic alignment of watching players just leaving personnel wide open, not accounted for, even in the additional look, that like when an offense lines up, they're usually whatever formation they start with is not the one that they end up running at the snap of the ball. There's usually some motion
Right.
involved. There's some readjusting. They're not even taking the time to align properly defensively at the moment. So I don't think a hand signal fixes that. I think there's just a basic football mentality of, oh, there's somebody lining up at receiver. I need to go over there and look like I'm covering them, regardless of whether they go into motion or not. That's where I think there's still a big issue, and hopefully that's fixed on Saturday.
What I'm worried about, because the last time we played Wake Forest was 2013. It was actually a relatively close game, 24-21. The last time Wake Forest ever beat Miami was World War II, 1944. I'm a little worried because statistically, it's a landslide. We blow them out in almost every statistical category. But again, this is going to sound a little bit like a broken record slash deja vu because I said the same thing for the Georgia Tech game, and we all know how that turned out. So, how do we keep ourselves from repeating what happened in Atlanta in Miami Gardens this Saturday?
I'll speak to a couple of things that's beyond Miami's control, but it's a home game, which is one helpful. Two, it's likely going to be a different crew, so you don't have to worry about how the game was actually played up in Atlanta. And
Yeah.
three, I think it's just a different style of offense that they're facing, so they shouldn't have the same issues in terms of, yeah, Wake Forest going to try to do the exact same thing, but Miami, figured it out towards the later half of the game against Wake Forest. It was really the offense that kind of, didn't didn't help Miami climb out of that hole. So I think the thing that you could look forward to is that it's a different game. Miami is a little bit more fresh. They get some players back. We'll see how much like Damari Brown plays in this game. He should be, at least getting a few snaps. So let's see how it goes. That's why the game is played.
Yeah, I mean, we're 24-point favorites. And Wake Forest's defense is giving up about 34.7 points a game, which is pretty much our bread and butter. That's like our soft spot, our happy spot in terms of scoring points. I mean, Georgia Tech aside, that I think that was an anomaly game. I think you get one of those at least every year. You're gonna
Yep.
have an anomaly game where you really don't play to your potential. Defense aside, our defense has been bad, which is why we've just been playing catch up for the most part on offense, but our offense has been studly. Again, minus the Georgia Tech game. My thought is we've been averaging 43 points. I see us somewhere in that 35, 38, maybe even 42 point category roughly. I think we will win. I think what I'm going to be looking out for the most is what's the rotation on the D line? Because I feel like there's some like Alston. I feel like I think there are other players that we haven't really seen. Maybe we can get some of these freshmen in to get some fresh legs and just to kind of push the ball. I would love to see us to stop stunting. Like these shifts on the line, the crossing, just barrel down the field, go as fast as you can. The guy in front of you, push him back, and let the guys in the end set the edges. Because That's something we've really been struggling to do. I don't think Wake Forest is one of these dink and dunk teams. So I'm hoping they haven't really been watching the film. I'm sure they obviously have that. It's tongue in cheek. But my hope is that our D line can set these edges and then watch for these plays to the flat, because that is literally where we're getting killed every single game, is these plays to the flat. And I'm not understanding. Is it, do you think it's the stunting? Do you think it's the assignment? So like the scheming, or do you think there is a slight talent discrepancy that is now kind of rearing its ugly head around this late in the season?
I don't think it's a talent thing on the defensive line. I think it's just so we've talked about this earlier in the season when it comes to complementary football, and we usually speak to it as the defense playing to complement the offense and vice versa. But a lot of that also happens between the different units on the same side of the ball. And I think it's that the defensive line is trying to do almost a little too much to where it leaves the linebackers exposed. So if you're just trying to, in this case, they're not really trying to get upfield, but they're trying to hold a couple of gaps. One thing that goes wrong, you lose the edge, you lose contain, you lose everything. And now the team is off to the races because they're going to the sideline. And if you don't have anybody out there to stop it, your linebackers aren't going to get there in time. And look, I think we do have an issue when it comes to overall team speed. We just don't seem to have that pursuit that we
Yeah.
used to. So if you
Which
can
is
just,
very
like you
weird.
said,
It's
yeah,
almost like
very odd.
it's a very, it's, to me it's like it's a give and take season, because we're not used to being this sort of, I mean, again, going back to the 2001 team and that whole class, you we've never really been known for being this super powered offense. We've usually had a very stout and fast defense who can get to the perimeter quick. But it seems like this is like one of those like Dr. Hyde and Jekyll years where it's like everything's kind of flipped on its face and we're this high powered offense and we can't seem to get to the edges. I would also like to see and wonder. It's senior day, obviously, so it's the last home game of the year. Usually, those years we like to feature a lot of seniors. Like we give them as much playing time as possible. What do you think the chances, though, are of us getting some of these freshmen, especially on the offensive side with the run game, to maybe get to the outside? Because those guys are speed guys. With Martinez aside, eh, we have some guys that are younger that can get to the outside. Despite them being freshmen, what do you think the chances are of them getting in the game? And if they do get in the game, how effective will they be?
Yeah, I think it's look, at this point in the season, Miami has to win out to keep its hopes alive of winning the ACC, making it to the ACC championship game, hopefully making the college football playoff. You can't really protect your playbook anymore if you have, packages that you can run your personnel with and run a little bit more speed to the outside, you have to use it. Now, if you're Miami, I think the best way to use that to utilize guys like Chris Johnson or AJ Allen, it might be running sets with two running backs. You saw a lot of that in the last couple of games with both Mark Fletcher and Damian Martinez. I think you run that with, Damian Martinez and a Chris Johnson, for example, or a Mark
Yeah,
Fletcher and AJ Allen, because you need to have at least one of those running backs back there for pass protection. That's where Miami's been its best, is in max protect with a running back blocking that extra pass rusher to give Cam Ward that extra time to, do his thing. If you want to have one do that in pass protect and the other one kind of be your outlet, your quick check down, that's kind of how I see that one going. So hopefully we see a little bit more of that this week, or they have something that's just designed running back, route, like a quick wheel route or something like that, just to get some extra space and get the ball out quickly, because that's something that's been missing the past few weeks. Everything's been forced 10, 15 yards down the field.
yeah. I think we also have to make sure we can kind of reel Cam in. I think we can, if we can just get to those check down plays, because to me, there's nothing wrong with a check down play. I'll take 2 or 3 yards as opposed to an incomplete interception, or possibly injuring a player because he's getting thrown and he's getting hit across the middle. So I would really like to see Cam do that. I would like to see a little bit more running to the outside, to the flats a little bit. I would actually love to see plays that are daggers to us be daggers to the other team. You know what I mean? Like screens. I would love to see more screens. I'm not sure what it is with our O line, because there's moments of brilliance and then there's moments of like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like sometimes our pass coverage is great, sometimes our pass coverage is terrible. Sometimes our run blocking is great, sometimes our run blocking is terrible. How how uh how reliable do you think our O line is going to be against this Wake Forest D line?
I think the O line should be fine. It's just a matter of how exotic do the blitzes look, and how really I think it determines like what the pace of the game looks like. If Miami happens to go down early, okay, now we're in some trouble because they're trying to force the ball more, or they're trying to force the ball downfield, and that's where they're going to have an issue. In terms of how they line up now, like if you're just starting the game 0-0, Miami looks good. They should exploit every part of that Wake Forest defense. If North Carolina can do it, Miami should be able to put up, 45, 50 points. It's just we'll see what that play looks like. You were talking about the screen passes, and one thing that I would like to see more of are different types of screens. What you saw against Georgia Tech that just didn't
Good
work
point.
was that quick wide receiver screen where you throw out to like a trip
Y-
set or a
Yeah,
diamond set to the sideline. And don't get me wrong, that's a good play to keep a defense honest to then open up the rest of your playbook later in the game, but you have to block it. And why those screens didn't work is because they weren't being blocked. They had, the same amount of personnel. If you had three guys out there, they had three defenders. They just the receiver was getting hit as he's catching the ball, which is a failure of executing the blocks. So you need to see that. And also, if you need to utilize a different look, you throw a tunnel screen, you throw your OG running back screen that you just don't really seem
that's
to use anymore. Like that's the
to
best way to end a pass rush is a quick running back screen.
Yeah, I feel like these last 2 games, we have to get back to basics. Just and not even for the sense of, like, because other stuff's not working. I think it's a confidence booster. It's a way of kind of stretching your legs, stretching your arms to figure out, "Okay, what else do we have in our arsenal?" And to keep other teams honest. I mean, like you said, you're talking about those wide receiver screens. I mean, that those things are telegraphed, I feel like, from a mile out. Like, I feel like we're just it's like, "Hey, yeah, that's what we're gonna do." Whereas if you get those lineman screens where you can pull a guard and a tackle either way, whether it's a left or right side, and then just dink it out there, or you keep the defense super honest, especially if they're playing man coverage, and you can hit like a Restrepo over the top. I mean, boom, you're golden. You know what I mean? And it's like I just don't see again nothing against our wide receivers, but I don't think our wide receivers bread and butter is blocking. You know what I mean? And so it's like, don't play to your strengths, you know? And so it's like, don't get cute, just do things that work. And 4 yards is 4 yards, you know? Like, I don't think we need to constantly be going over the top, constantly going for these 15+ yard plays when we could easily shoot something off to the flat for 2 or 3 yards. Let our playmakers make plays, because that's the other thing I really would love to see in this game, which we didn't see too much in the Georgia Tech game, is the playmakers making plays. Let these guys catch some balls in space. Let them make a move or two and see where we go. Worst comes to worst, you get 4 yards. Best case scenario, you can get what happened like Restrepo when he broke the record, where he had that like 60 or 70 yard catch. You know what I mean? I think it was like a 20 or 30 yard pass, but then he got an additional 20, 30 yards from a missed tackle, you know?
Yeah, the
Which
timing was perfect on that play.
it was. And speaking of missed tackles, in that article I was referencing earlier from the Miami Herald, what they were talking about was Miami having, I think it was anywhere between 83 to 86 missed tackles. Now, apparently that's a normal stat for any team where we're at in this season. But what they noted was that it was in particular damaging when these missed tackles were occurring for Miami. And that has been, I feel like, the theme of the season. It's not it's a we have a bend not break defense, but the problem is when the dam breaks, it is like one of these unlucky moments where it is that one tackle that we miss, you know? And so my
Yeah.
hope is that we can secure these tackles, get in the right assignment, but like again, on the defensive side and offensive side, don't get cute. No more stunting with the linemen. Just push. You have athletes, especially against Wake Forest, and I'm assuming Syracuse too next week. I mean, I'll do a little bit more homework for Syracuse. I usually just focus on the week, but looking at Wake Forest's linemen, we should be able to push them back. There should be no reason why Bain, Barron, anyone shouldn't be in that backfield. I would say at least a minimum 1.5 plays out of each drive. You know what I mean? Or each down. So we're going to have to see, but Miami absolutely needs to win to stay alive in the college football playoff for their college football player hopes to stay alive. I thought what was interesting this week was seeing some of the people who were out and some of the people who were in. So this week we lost LSU,